6, 5, 4, 3, ignition, 3, 2, 1, 0. Roger. Liftoff. Liftoff. Bravo, Fox away.
This is your Colbycast, a weekly roundup of news from the Colbyjack.net world headquarters, flavored with a healthy dose of fiction. Push the button! Welcome to Colbycast 31 for July 13th, 2011. Hello and welcome. I am R.L. Ferguson, known among the freedom-loving rodents of the Fox River Valley as the Ender of Worlds. Welcome to another Colbycast. What to talk about? Boomba Roomba. Oh, I learned something kind of cool this week. Yeah, I did. It appears that not all sounds are created equal. Amazing, isn't it? Where this comes from is that I have finished soundtracking the Nut Heist and encountered a couple of strange issues with the mixdown. Normally, when I assemble my tracks, I set them so the loudest note of an instrument is set to about minus 20 decibels, in order to keep them well out of the way of the spoken word. Works well so far. So I standardized all the top ends of all the instruments and found that the violins, viola, and the Bretonian bagpipe samples were all standing on top of the mix. They were blatantly strutting their stuff for everyone to see. Very, very rude of them. So I started fiddling with the levels and found that the highest notes, the violins and Bretonian bagpipes, needed to be dropped 20 more decibels. And the viola, 10 decibels as well. To be honest, I thought I was going a little buggy. Really, 2 hours worth of soundtracks, or thereabouts, and I start to hear things. Weird things. No, not vampires telling me to sacrifice Colbyjack to my dark lord. Weird. More like, why is that noise sitting on top of the mix? I hates the sound I do. I hates it. But hey, you move the levels, and life becomes better. Though for some reason Colbyjack has buried all the kitchen knives in the backyard. Have to ask him about that later. So, I gave it very little thought, then I Googled it. Really, did you expect anything else? So there it was, glowing out of my phone. The human ear hears high frequencies better than low frequencies. We aren't tuned to hear the human voice. We are tuned to hear sticks cracking in the dark as a pygmy Allosaurus slips in through the forest, shuts off my anti-bear electric fence, and attempts to make me its latest hors d'oeuvre. All because I made a little omelet from its eggs. Really, I eat your children and you try to kill me? What is this world coming to? Chickens don't attack you for making omelets or for frying their friends, for that matter. Really, pygmy Allosaurus, get with the program. I am not a snack. You get that? Not a snack. Bad, Allosaurus. Bad. Oh. Where was I? Oh, yeah. High frequencies stand out to the human ear more than low frequencies. Don't believe me? Okay. Don't believe me. Just check out Wikipedia. The article on loudness has a chart I really need to print, showing how the higher pitch the sound, the lower the volume can be to get the same loudness. Yeah! People with more time and brains than me. So that is my little tidbit. High-pitched sounds can be made lower in level without loss to the mix. Okay, next bit of excitement. Oh, let me see. I am in the process of recording For the Win by Cory Doctorow. Would you believe it took me nearly an hour just to set up the episode breaks? Each episode will average about 4,800 words. So about a half hour an episode. And we will have 37 episodes. That's right, 37 episodes. Currently I have 3 in the can. The reading, that is. And if I keep on the path of 3 episodes a day, I should have the reading done by July 25th. That will leave me about a week to soundtrack both The Mouse Queen and For the Win. Hey, now that I think about it, The Mouse Queen will have an extra 5 days. So, not bad. Not bad at all. Hey, I'm still looking for the next Colbycast story. So if you know one in the public domain, or one you've written, and you want us to peruse it, drop me a line at rlferguson@Colbyjack.net. Yes, that's rlferguson@Colbyjack.net. Oh, details. Okay, we want manuscripts from 3,000 words and up. We want them to be science fiction, fantasy, horror, or any other genres written at a level that my mother would put up with. That is, no smut. We don't want romance or paranormal romance. The work has to be published somewhere. Self-pub counts. We don't pay. Yes, we don't pay. You keep all the rights. We just want to put it up. We accept doc, docx, RTF, HTML, EPUB, or Mobi versions. So we're quite flexible. And you can send them to, can we hear this again? rlferguson@Colbyjack.net. The subject line should include the word submission, your name, and the title of your piece. Now on to the part you are really here for. The Night of the Long Knives by Fritz Leiber, Part 3. Part 1 is contained in Colbycast 29. Part 2 is contained in Colbycast 30. Part 3 is contained in Colbycast 31. Wait a minute. That's this podcast. Snap. If you are from the future, could you please remind me in the past, when you get there, to put the keys to the cage under the rock just inside the gate? That will help so much with the situation I'm in. Oh, great. There it is. Stupid pygmy Allosaurus has thumbs but can't handle time travel. Stupid Allosaurus. Oh, back to the really real. The story so far. Our narrator, a survivor of a nuclear apocalypse. What a bummer. Meets an enigmatic woman in the wilderness. A woman with a lovely scar, a dart pistol, and a hook for a hand. What a beauty. Naturally, they succumb to good old urge number 2. Urge number 1 being murder. And get it all like Donkey Kong alongside a ruined petroleum cracking plant. I remember it like it was last chapter. How romantic. The next morning, a strange aircraft lands near them. And like a couple of old pros, the pair arrange to do a little of the old ultraviolence. That's right, they killed the pilot. Yep, deader than a doornail. Just as they are trying to come to grips with the fact that every bit of metal on the pilot, his gun, his pocket knife, his robot chicken, melt into puddles of goo that starts anything it touches smoldering. Which is, of course, when a mysterious stranger pokes his head around the plane and asks, why did they light him on fire? So grab your gas mask, Geiger counter, and favorite knife as we trek into the wastes of Neverwhere during the time of Never When with The Night of the Long Knives by Fritz Leiber. The Night of the Long Knives by Fritz Leiber, Chapter 3. We are always, thanks to our human nature, potential criminals. None of us stands outside humanity's black collective shadow. The Undiscovered Self by Carl Jung. Ordinarily, scroungers who hide around on the outskirts until the killing's done and then come in to share the loot get what they deserve. Wordless orders, well backed up to be on their way at once. Sometimes they even catch an afterclap of the murder urge. If it hasn't all been expended on the first victim or victims. Yet they will do it, trusting, I suppose, to the irresistible glamour of their personalities. There are several reasons why we didn't at once give Pop this treatment. In the first, we didn't neither of us have our distance weapons. My revolver and her dart gun were both tucked in the cave back at the edge of the freeway. And there's one bad thing about a booger so knife-happy, he lugs them around by the carload. He's generally good at tossing them. With his dozen or so knives, Pop definitely outgunned us. Second, we were both of us without the use of an arm. That's right, the both of us. My right arm still dangled like a string of sausages, and I couldn't yet feel any signs of it coming undead. While she had burned her fingers badly grabbing at the gun, I could see their red splotched tips now as she pulled them out of her mouth for a second to wipe the pilot's blood out of her eyes. All she had was her stump with the knife screwed to it. Me, I could throw a knife left-handed if I have to, but you bet I wasn't going to risk Mother that way. Then, I'd no sooner heard Pop's voice, breathy and a little high like an old man's will get, than it occurred to me that he must have been the one who had given the funny scream that had distracted the pilot's attention and let us get him. Which incidentally made Pop a quick thinker and imaginative to boot, and meant that he had helped on the killing. Besides all that, Pop did not come in fawning and full of extravagant praise, as most scroungers will. He just assumed equality with us from the start, and he talked in an absolutely matter-of-fact way, neither praising nor criticizing one bit. Too damn matter-of-fact and open, for that matter, to suit my taste. But then I've heard other boogers say that some old men are apt to get talkative, though I had never worked with or run into one myself. Old people are very rare in the Deathlands, as you might imagine. So the girl and me just scowled at him, but did nothing to stop him as he came along. Near us, his extra knives would be no advantage to him. Huh, he said. Looks a lot like a guy I murdered 5 years back down Los Alamos way. Same silver monkey suit, and almost as tall. Nice chap, too. Was trying to give me something for a fever I'd faked. That his gun melted? My man didn't smoke after I gave him his quietus, but then it turned out he didn't have any metal on him. I wonder if this chap... He started to kneel down by the body. Hands off, Pop, I gritted at him. That was how we started calling him Pop. Why, sure, he said, staying there on one knee. I won't lay a finger on him. It's just that I've heard the Alamoses have it rigged so that any metal they're carrying melts when they die. And I was wondering about this boy. But he's all yours, friend. By the way, what's your name, friend? Ray, I snarled. Ray Baker. I think the main reason I told him was that I didn't want him calling me friend again. You talk too much, Pop. I suppose I do, Ray, he agreed. What's your name, lady? The girl just sort of hissed at him, and he grinned at me as if to say, Oh, women. Then he said, Why don't you go through his pockets, Ray? I'm real curious. Shut up, I said. But I felt that he'd put me on the spot just the same. I was curious about the guy's pockets myself, of course. But I was also wondering if Pop was alone or if he had somebody with him, and whether there was anybody else in the plane or not. Things like that, too many things. At the same time, I didn't want to let on to Pop how useless my right arm was. If I just get a twinge of feeling in that arm, I knew I'd feel a lot more confident fast. I knelt down across the body from him, starting to lay Mother aside, and then hesitated. The girl gave me an encouraging look as if to say, I'll take care of the old geezer. On the strength of her look, I put down Mother and started to pry open the pilot's left hand, which was clenched in a fist that looked a mite too big to have nothing inside it. The girl started to edge behind Pop, but he caught the movement right away and looked at her with a grin that was so knowing and yet so friendly, and yet so pitying at the same time. With the pity of the old pro for even the seasoned amateur. That in her place, I think I'd have blushed myself, as she did now, through the streaks of the pilot's blood. You don't have to worry none about me, lady, he said, running a hand through his white hair and incidentally touching the pommel of one of the two knives strapped high on the back of his jacket, so he could reach one over either shoulder. I quit murdering some years back. Got to be too much of a strain on my nerves. Oh yeah? I couldn't help saying as I pried up the pilot's index finger and started on the next. Then why the stab factory, Pop? Oh, you mean those? He said, glancing down at his knives. Well, the fact is, Ray, I carry them to impress boogers dumber than you and the lady here. Anyone wants to think I'm still a practicing murderer, I got no objections. Matter of sentiment, too. I just hate to part with them. They bring back important memories. And then, you wouldn't believe this, Ray, but I'm going to tell you just the same. Guys just up and give me their knives, and I doubly hate to part with a gift. I wasn't going to say, oh yeah, again, or shut up, either. Though I certainly wished I could turn off Pop's spigot, or thought I did. Then I felt a painful tingling shoot down my right arm. I smiled at Pop and said, any other reasons? Yep, he says. Gotta shave and I might as well do it in style. A new blade every day and the fortnight is twice as good as the old ads. You know, it makes you keep a knife in fine shape if you shave with it. What have you got there, Ray? You're wrong, Pop, I said. You did have some metal on him that didn't melt. I held up for them to see the object I'd extricated from his left fist. A bright steel cube measuring about an inch across each side, but it felt lighter than if it were solid metal. 5 of the faces looked absolutely bare. The 6th had a round button recessed in it. From the way they looked at it, neither Pop nor the girl had the faintest idea of what it was. I certainly hadn't. Had he pushed the button? The girl asked. Her voice was throaty, but unexpectedly refined, as if she had done no talking at all, not even to herself, since coming to the Deathlands, and so retained the cultural intonations she'd had earlier. Whenever and wherever that had been. It gave me a funny feeling, of course, because they were the first words I'd heard her speak. Not from the way he was holding it, I told her. The button was pointed up toward his thumb, but the thumb was on the outside of his fingers. I felt an unexpected satisfaction at having expressed myself so clearly, and I told myself not to get childish. The girl slitted her eyes. Don't you push it, Ray, she said. Think I'm nuts? I told her, meanwhile sliding the cube into the smaller pocket of my pants where it fit tight and wouldn't turn sideways, and the button might get pressed by accident. The tingling in my right arm was almost unbearable now, but I was getting control over the muscles again. Pushing that button, I added, might melt what's left of the plane or blow us all up. It never hurts to emphasize that you may have another weapon in your possession, even if it's just a suicide bomb. There was a man pushed another button once, Pop said softly and reflectively. His gaze went far out over the Deathlands. It took in a good half of the horizon, and he slowly shook his head. Then his face brightened. Did you know, Ray, he said, that I actually met that man long afterwards? You don't believe me? I know, but I actually did. Tell you about it some other time. I almost said, thanks, Pop, for sparing me at least for a while. But I was afraid that would set him off again. Besides, it wouldn't have been quite true. I've heard other boogers tell the yarn of how they met, and invariably rubbed out, the actual guy who pushed the button or buttons that set the fusion missiles blasting toward their targets. But I felt a sudden curiosity as to what Pop's version of the yarn would be. Oh well, I could ask him some other time, if we both lived that long. I started to check the pilot's pockets. My right hand can help a little now. Those look like mean burns you got there, lady, I heard Pop tell the girl. He was right. There were blisters easy to see on 3 of the fingertips. I've got some salve that's pretty good, he went on, and some clean cloth. I could put on a bandage for you if you wanted. If your hand started to feel poisoned, you could always tell Ray here to slip a knife in me. Pop was a cute gasser, you had to admit. I reminded myself that it was Pop's business to play up to both of us, charm being the secret weapon of all scroungers. The girl gave a harsh little laugh. "Very well," she said, "but you will use my salve. I know it works for me." And she started to lead Pop to where we'd hidden our things. "I'll go with you," I told them, standing up. It didn't look like we were going to have any more murders today. Pop had got through the preliminary ingratiations pretty well, and the girl and me had our catharsis. But that would be no excuse for any such stupidity as letting the two of them get near my 38. Strolling to the cave and back, I eased the situation a bit by saying, "That scream you let off, Pop, really helped. I don't know what gave you the idea, but thanks." "Oh, that," he said. "Forget about it." "I won't," I told him. "You might say you've quit killing, but you helped a do-in today." "Ray," he said a little solemnly, "if it'll make you feel any happier, I'll take a bit of the responsibility for every murder that's been done since the beginning of time." I looked at him for a while, then. "Pop, you're not by any chance a religious type?" I asked suddenly. "Lord, no," he told us. That struck me as a satisfactory answer. God preserve me from the religious types. We have quite a few of those in the Deathlands. Generally means that they try to convert you to something before they kill you, or sometimes afterwards. We completed our ends. I felt a lot more secure with old financier's friend strapped to my middle. Mother is wonderful, but she is not enough. I dawdled over inspecting the pilot's pockets, partly to give my right hand time to come back all the way, and to tell the truth, I didn't much enjoy the job. A corpse, especially such a handsome cadaver as this, just didn't go with Pop's brand of light patter. Pop did up the girl's hand in high style, bandaging each finger separately, and then persuaded her to put on a big left-hand work glove he took out of his small pack. "Lost the right," he explained, "which was the only one I ever used anyway. Never knew until now I kept this. How does it feel, Alice?" I might have known he'd worm her name out of her. It occurred to me that Pop's idea of scrounging might extend to Alice's favors. The urge didn't die out when you get old, they tell me. Not completely. It also helped to replace the knife on her stump with the hook. By that time, I'd poked into all the pilot's pockets I could get at without stripping him, and found nothing but 3 irregularly shaped blobs of metal, still hot to the touch. Under the charred spots, of course. I didn't want the job of stripping him. Somebody else could do a little work, I told myself. I've been bothered by bodies before, as who hasn't, I suppose. But this one was really beginning to make me sick. Maybe I was cracking up, it occurred to me. Murder is a wearing business, as all Deathlanders know. And although some crack earlier than others, all crack in the end. I must have been showing how I was feeling, because, "Cheer up, Ray," Pop said. "You and Alice have done a big murder. I'd say the subject was 6'10", so you ought to be happy. You've drawn a blank on his pockets, but there's still the plane." "Yeah, that's right," I said, brightening a little. "There's still the stuff in the plane." I knew there were some items I couldn't hope for, like 38 shells, but there'd be food and other things. "No," Pop corrected me. I said, "the plane. You might have thought it wrecked, but I don't. Have you taken a real gander at it? It's worth doing, believe me." I jumped up. My heart was suddenly pounding. I was glad of an excuse to get away from the body, but there was a lot more in my feelings than that. I was filled with an excitement to which I didn't want to give a name because it would make the letdown too great. One of the wide stubby wings of the plane, raking downward though its tip almost touched the concrete, had hidden the undercarriage of the fuselage from our view. Now coming around the wing, I saw that there was no undercarriage. I had to drop to my hands and knees and scan around with my cheek next to the concrete before I believed it. The wrecked plane was at all points at least 6 inches off the ground. I got to my feet again. I was shaking. I wanted to talk, but I couldn't. I grabbed the leading edge of the wing to stop me from falling. The whole body of the plane gave a fraction of an inch and then resisted my leaning weight with lazy power, just like a gyroscope. "Anti-gravity," I croaked, though you couldn't have heard me with 2 feet. Then my voice came back. "Bob, Alice, they got anti-gravity, and it's working." Alice had just come around the wing and was facing me. She was shaking too, and her face was white like I knew mine was. Pop was politely standing off a little to one side, watching us curiously. "Told you you'd won a real prize," he said in his matter-of-fact way. Alice wet her lips. "Ray," she said, "we can get away." Just those 4 words, but they did it. Something in me unlocked. No, exploded describes it better. "We can go places," I almost shouted. "Beyond the dust," she said. "Mexico City, South America." She was forgetting the Deathlander's cynical article of belief that the dust never ends. But then so was I. It makes a difference whether or not you've got a means of doing something. "Rio," I topped her with. "The Indies, Hong Kong, Bombay, Egypt, Burma, the French Riviera." "Bullfights and clean beds," she burst out with. "Restaurants, swimming pools, bathrooms." "Skin diving," I took up with it, as hysterical as she was. "Road races and roulette tables." "Bentleys and Porsches." "Air Coupes and DC-4s and Comets." "Martinis and hashish and ice cream sodas." "Hot food, fresh coffee, gambling, smoking, dancing, music, drinks." I was going to add women, but then I thought of how hard-bitten little Alice would look beside the dream creatures I had in mind. I tactfully suppressed the word, but I filed the idea away. I don't think either of us knew exactly what we were saying. Alice in particular, I don't believe was old enough to have experienced almost any of the things the words referred to. They were mysterious symbols of long, interdicted delight spewing out of us. "Ray," Alice said, hurrying to me, "let's get aboard." "Yes," I said eagerly, and then I saw a little problem. The door to the plane was a couple of feet above our heads. Whoever hoisted himself up first, or got hoisted up, as would have to be the case with Alice on account of her hand, would be momentarily at the other's mercy. I guess it occurred to Alice too, because she stopped and looked at me. It was a little like the old teaser about the fox, the goose, and the corn. Maybe too, we were both a little scared the plane was booby-trapped. Pop solved the problem in the direct way I might have expected of him by stepping quietly between us. Giving a light leap, catching hold of the curving sill, chinning himself up on it, and scrambling up into the plane so quickly that we'd hardly have had time to do anything about it if we'd wanted to. Pop couldn't be much more than a bantamweight, even with all his knives. The plane sagged an inch and then swung up again. As Pop disappeared from view, I backed off, reaching for my .38, but a moment later he struck out his hand and grinned down at us, resting his elbows on the sill. "Come on up," he said. "It's quite a place. I promise not to push any buttons till you get here, though there's whole regiments of them." I grinned back at Pop and gave Alice a boost up. She didn't like it, but she could see it had to be her next. She hooked up onto the sill, and Pop caught hold of her left wrist below the big glove and heaved. Then it was my turn. I didn't like it. I didn't like the idea of those 2 boogers posed above me while my hands were helpless on the sill. But I thought, Pop's a nut. You can trust a nut, at least a little ways, though you can't trust nobody else. I heaved myself up. It was strange to feel the plane give it and then bracing itself like something alive. It seemed to have no trouble accepting our combined weight, which after all was hardly more than half again the pilot's. Inside, the cabin was pretty small, but as Pop had implied, oh my! Everything looked soft and smoothly curved, like you imagine your insides being, and almost everything was a restfully dull silver. The general shape of it was something like the inside of an egg. Forward, which was the larger end, were a couple of screens and a wide viewport and some small dials and the button brigades Pop had mentioned, lined up like blank typewriter keys, but enough for writing Chinese. Just aft of the instrument panel were two very comfortable-looking strange low seats. They seemed to be facing backwards until I realized they were meant to be knelt into. The occupant, I could see, was trying to crawl forward, his hands free for button pushing and such. There were spongy chin rests. Aft was a tiny instrument panel and a kind of sideways seat, not nearly so fancy. The door by which we had entered was to the side, a little aft. I didn't see any indications of cabinets or fixed storage spaces of any kinds, but somehow, stuck to the walls here and there were quite a few smooth, blobby packages. Mostly dull silver, too. Some large, some small. Valises and handbags, you might say. All in all, it was a lovely cabin, and more than that, it seemed lived in. It looked as if it had been shaped for and maybe by one man. It had a personality you could feel, a strong but warm personality of its own. Then I realized whose personality it was. I almost got sick. So close to it, I started telling myself it must be something anti-gravity did to your stomach. But it was all too interesting to let you get sick right away. Pop was poking into two of the large mound-shaped cases that were sitting loose and open on the right-hand seat, as if ready for emergency use. One had a folding something with straps on it that was probably a parachute. The second had, I judged, 1,000 or more of the inch cubes such as I had pried out of the pilot's hand, all neatly stacked in a cubical box inside the soft outer bag. You could see the one cube gap where he'd taken the one. I decided to take the rest of the bags off the walls and open them, if I could figure out how. The others had the same idea, but Alice had to take off her hook and put on her pliers before she could make progress. Pop helped her. There was room enough for us to do these things without crowding each other too closely. By the time Alice was set to go, I discovered the trick of getting the bags off. You couldn't pull them away from the wall, no matter what force you used. At least I couldn't. And you couldn't even slide them straight along the walls. But if you just gave them a gentle counterclockwise twist, they came off like nothing. Twisting them clockwise glued them back on. It was very strange, but I told myself that if these boys could generate anti-gravity fields, they could create screwy fields of other sorts. It also occurred to me to wonder if these boys came from Earth. The pilot had looked human enough, but these accomplishments didn't. Not by my standards for human achievement in the age of the Deaders. At any rate, I had to admit to myself that my pet term, cultural queer, did not describe to my own satisfaction members of a culture which could create things like this cabin. Not that I liked making the admission. It's hard to admit an exception to a pet gripe against things. The excitement of getting down and opening the Christmas packages saved me from speculating too much along these or any other lines. I hit a minor jackpot right away. In the same bag were a compass, a catalytic pocket lighter, a knife with a sawtooth back edge that made my affection for Mother waver, a dust mask, what looked like a compact water filtration unit, and several other items adding up to a deluxe Deathland survival kit. There were some goggles in the kit I didn't savvy until I put them on and surveyed the landscape out the viewport. A nearby dust drift I knew to be hot glowed green as death in the slightly smoky lenses. Wow, those specks had Geiger counters beat a mile, and I privately bet myself they worked at night. I stuck them in my pocket quick. We found bunches of tiny electronic parts. I think they were spools of magnetic tape, but nothing to play it on. Reels of very narrow film with frames much too small to see anything at all unmagnified. About 3,000 cigarettes in unlabeled transparent packs of 20. We lit up quick, using my new lighter. A picture book that didn't quite make sense because the views might have been of tissue sections or star fields. We couldn't quite decide. And there were no captions to help. A thin book with rice paper pages covered with Chinese characters. That was a puzzler. A thick book with nothing but columns of figures, all zeros and ones, and nothing else. Some tiny chisels, and a mouth organ. Pop, who'd made a point of just helping in the hunt, appropriated that last item. I might have known he would, I told myself. Now we could expect turkey in the straw at odd moments. Alice found a whole bag of what were women's things, judging from the frilliness of the garments included. She set aside some squeeze packs and little gadgets and elastic items right away, but she didn't take any of the clothes. I caught her measuring some kind of transparent chemise against herself when she thought we weren't looking. It was for a girl maybe 6 sizes bigger. And we found food. Cans of food that was heated up inside by the time you got the top rolled off, though the outside could still be cool to the touch. Cases of boneless steak, boneless chops, cream soup, peas, carrots, and fried potatoes. They weren't labeled at all, but you could generally guess the contents from the shape of the can. Eggs that heated when you touched them and were soft-boiled evenly and barely firm by the time you had the shell broke. And small plastic bottles of strong coffee that heated up hospitably, too. In this case, the tops did a 5-second hesitation in the middle of your unscrewing them. At that point, you can imagine we let the rest of the packages go and had ourselves a feast. The food ate even better than it smelled. It was real hard for me not to gorge. Then, as I was slurping down my second bottle of coffee, I happened to look out the viewport and see the pilot's body and the darkening puddle around it, and the coffee began to taste, well, not bad, but sickening. I don't think it was guilty conscience. Deathlanders outgrow those if they ever have them to start with. Loners don't keep consciences. It takes cultures to give you those and make them work. Artistic inappropriateness is the closest I can come to describing what bothered me. Whatever it was, it made me feel lousy for a minute. About the same time, Alice did an odd thing with the last of her coffee. She slopped it on a rag and used it to wash her face. I guess she caught a reflection herself with the blood smears. She didn't eat any more after that either. Pop kept on chomping away, a slow feeder and appreciative. To be doing something, I started to inspect the instrument panel, and right away I was all excited again. The 2 screens were what got me. They showed shadowy maps, one of North America, the other of the world. The first one was a whole lot like the map I'd been imagining earlier. Faint colors marked the small, civilized areas, including one in eastern Canada and another in upper Michigan that might be countries I didn't know about. And the Deathlands were real dark, just as I'd always maintained they should be. South of Lake Michigan was a brightly luminous green point that must be where we were, I decided. And for some reason, the colored areas representing Los Alamos and Atlantic Highlands were glowing brighter than the others. They had an active luminosity. Los Alamos was blue, Atla High violet. Los Alamos was shown having more territory than I expected. Savannah Fortress, for that matter, was a whole lot bigger than I'd have made it, pushing out pseudopods west and northeast along the coast, though its red didn't have the extra glow. But its growth pattern reeked of imperialism. The world screen showed dim color patches too, but for the moment I was more interested in the other. The button armies marched right up to the lower edge of the screens, and right away I got the crazy hunch that they were connected with spots on the map. Push the button for a certain spot and the plane would go there. Why, one button even seemed to have a faint violet nimbus around it, or else my eyes were going bad, as if to say, "Push me and we go to Atlantic Highlands." A crazy notion, as I say, and no sensible way to handle a plane's navigation according to any standards I could imagine. But then, as I've always said, this plane didn't seem to be designed according to any standards, but rather in line with one man's ideas, including his whims. At any rate, there was my hunch about the buttons and the screens. It tantalized rather than helped. The only button that seemed to be marked in any way was the one, guessing by the color, for Atlantic Highlands. And I certainly didn't want to go there. Like Alamos, Atla High has the reputation for being a mysteriously dangerous place. Not openly mean and death-on-deathlanders like Walla Walla or Porter, but buggers who swing too close to Atla High have a way of never turning up again. You never expect to see again 2 out of 3 buggers who pass in the night, but for 3 out of 3 to keep disappearing is against statistics. Alice was beside me now, scanning things over too, and from the way she frowned and whatnot, I gathered she had caught my hunch and also shared my puzzlement. Now was the time, all right, when we needed an instruction manual and not one in Chinese neither. Pop swallowed a mouthful and said, "Yep, now'd be a good time to have him back for a minute, to explain things a bit. Oh, don't take offense, Ray. I know how it was for you, and for you too, Alice. I know the both of you had to murder him. It wasn't a matter of free choice. It's the way us Deathlanders are built. Just the same, it'd be nice to have a way of killing them and keeping them on hand at the same time. I remember feeling that way after murdering the Alamosa I told you about. You see, I come down with the very fever I'd faked and almost died of it, while the man who could have cured me easy wouldn't do nothing but perfume the landscape with the help of a gang of anaerobic bacteria. Stubborn, single-minded cuss." The first thought of that oration started up my sickness again. It irked me not a little. Damn it, what right had Pop to talk how all us Deathlanders had to kill? Which was true enough, and by itself would have made me cotton to him. If, as he had claimed earlier, he had been able to quit killing, Pop was an old hypocrite, I told myself. He had helped murder the pilot. He had admitted as much. And Alice and me'd be better off if we'd bedded the both of them down together. But then the second part of what Pop said so made me want to feel pleasantly sorry for myself and laugh at the same time that I forgave the old geezer. Practically everything Pop said had that reassuring touch of insanity about it. So it was Alice who said, "Shut up, Pop," and rather casually at that. And she and me went on to speculate and to argue about which buttons we ought to push, if any, and in what order. Why not just start anywhere and keep pushing them one after another? You're going to have to eventually, may as well start now, was Pop's lighthearted contribution to the discussion. Gotta take some chances in this life. He was sitting in the back seat and still nibbling away like a white-topped, mangy old squirrel. Of course, Alice and me knew more than that. We kept making guesses as how the buttons worked and then backing up our guesses with hot language. It was a little like two savages trying to decide how to play chess by looking at the pieces. And then the old Escape to Paradise theme took hold of us again, and we studied the colored blobs on the world screen, trying to decide which would have the fanciest accommodations for blasé ex-murderers. On the North America screen, too, there was an intriguing pink patch in southern Mexico that seemed to take in Old Mexico City and Acapulco, too. "Quit talking and stop pushing," Pop prodded us. "This way you're getting nowhere fast. I can't stand hesitation. It riles my nerves." Alice thought we ought to push 10 buttons at once, using both hands, and she was working out patterns for me to try. But I was off on a kick about how we should darken the plane to see if any of the other buttons glowed beside the one with the Atla High violet. "Look here, you killed a big man to get this plane," Pop broke in, coming up behind me. "Are you going to use it for discussion groups, or are you going to fly it?" "Quiet," I told him. I got a new hunch, and was using the dark glasses to scan the instrument panel. They didn't show anything. "Damn it, I can't stand this anymore," Pop said, and reached a hand and arm between us and brought it down on about 50 buttons, I'd judge. The other buttons just went up and down, but the Atla High button went down and stayed down. The violet blob of Atla High on the screen got even brighter in the next few moments. The door closed with a tiny thud. We took off.
This has been a Colbycast episode.
This work is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license. Share it, link it, blog it, talk about it. As Woody Guthrie said, this song is copyrighted in the U.S. under seal of copyright number 154085 for a period of 28 years, and anybody caught singing it without our permission will be a mighty good friend to ourn, because we don't give a darn. Publish it, write it, sing it, swing to it, yodel it. We wrote it, that's all we wanted to do.